All right, let's see what we have here. All right. British Columbia, welcome Alabama, welcome Ann Arbor. Go Blue. I lived in Ann Arbor when I went to Michigan and I miss it. So welcome from Ann Arbor, Brian. Welcome Montreal. Sadly, a city I have not been to yet. I'm rather ashamed to say.
Me neither. I've heard a lot of cool things about it, though.
Welcome, Kansas City. I thought you were from Audio Good, Kansas City. So audio's good, and you're from Kansas City. I guess Kansas City, unless that's a shorthand for a Canadian province. That's not coming to mind. Welcome, Utah. I have some family out in Utah. Welcome, Haiti. Had somebody from Aruba this morning. So we have about 18 people. That's been fairly consistent. I don't know if you want to wait like another 30 seconds. Maybe we should kick things off.
30 seconds and just make sure.
Okay.
Hope everybody's doing good out there. And, spring is another day closer, right? Every single day we're getting a little bit closer to that. So I'm pretty excited about it. I'm ready for spring. So
yeah, me too. It was 50 degrees in Delaware yesterday after a lot of snow, which I'm happy about. I'm not complaining that we had a lot of snow this season. I'm happy we did.
That's awesome. All right, so let's get started. We have a very exciting topic today, and
so says you, Dan.
Yeah. Well, it's old hat for you, right? I mean, it's stuff that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I like talking about this stuff, but go ahead, kick it off, and then I'll.
Yeah. Well, today we have. Well, first off, I'm Dan Tomaszewski. If anybody is not aware of me, I'm with Everything MSP. I also own an MSP out of Grand Rapids, Michigan, called Greenlight Business Technology. And today we are here with David Gugick. And I know you said you can pronounce it two different ways, right?
You can do Gugick, you can do Gugick, or as I probably mentioned last time, my dad was in sales most of his career. He used green, like the color, because nobody ever asked him how to spell it.
Very cool. That's whatever works, right? And you are the VP of Product Management at MSP360.
That sounds fancy.
Very fancy, I mean, I use the term, business geek, AKA president, but hey, whatever title you want, right? So today we are going to talk about building an effective backup strategy. And, when we think about the responsibility that each of us as MSPs have in managing our clients' IT, backup is one of the most critical things. Clearly, if something were to happen to all your clients' data, that would be a disaster on so many levels. And so today we're going to talk about just some successful ways, some best practices, and ways in which you can help, I guess, mitigate the stress involved in managing one's backup. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to David. If anybody has any questions as we go, please feel free to throw them out there, and we'll get them as soon as we can.
Yeah, go ahead. I would say use the Q&A since we have Dan who's going to help moderate in case questions come in. And you know what? I have a bunch of slides. I'll just continue to read them and talk about them. But I would love for anybody on to participate, type questions in the Q&A, type comments in the chat. If you think what I'm saying is completely off base, criticize me. If I'm not mentioning something that you think would have been important to add, let the group know. I hope to learn something from this too. So I have a lot of slides and let's get started. So some of these are going to be kind of obvious, some of these questions, but I kind of wanted to cover like the whole spread of, do you need backup services? What you need to do to prepare when you're looking for new products, what you should do when you get these new products, how to onboard customers, selling, dealing with sales objections, that kind of stuff. So I have a lot of stuff to cover, and we'll see how much we can get through, hopefully most of it. So let's start with the first question. Do you need backup services? And I think the short answer to that is yes. And I think most MSPs would probably agree today. And I think even 4 years ago when I joined MSP360, we would survey and look at surveys, and about 80% of MSPs that were offering managed IT services had customers that were buying their backup services. At that point, they were clearly sold as a separate service, and it was not a requirement, and about 80% penetration within that market. That has changed a lot over the last 4 years. Now we see backup services up there at around 96%, really as a tier 1 critical service, along with things like RMM and security. And that is important for us because we're in the business of selling backup services. It's also important for MSPs because it's another service out there that can generate additional revenue for you while protecting your customers. So I think the important takeaway on this slide is really that even 4 years ago, when there's only an 80% penetration, according to most studies, MSPs still offered backup services as a way to protect their customers against, accidental or malicious data loss. And just imagine the difficulties that you might run into as an MSP if you had a customer who lost data and you had no ability to restore that data. So you never want to be in that position. And even if you offered the service and they refused, and we'll talk more a little bit about that on the upcoming slide. So definitely add it to your portfolio. If you're coming into the MSP world new and you're asking yourself, should I offer it? I think the question is yes.
Definitely.
Dropbox is not backup. Dropbox is more like replication, and usually we'll replicate things. Well, I'll probably mention this later, but replication or just copying things or things that replicate local folders in the cloud or from the cloud locally might be at risk. If you delete something locally or you get hit by ransomware and it deletes all your photos locally, will that replicate up to Dropbox? It might. There's certainly no versioning there. So yes, if you think of Dropbox as a place for photos, maybe that's fine if you don't have versions. But when you're dealing with multiple versions for documents and databases and images for entire servers, I think that's a different story. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So next question I guess you should be asking is, should backup services be a required service for your customer? And I think you're gonna have to make this decision yourself. I can only tell you and reiterate what I said on the previous slide, which is almost every customer that works with an MSP that offers managed IT services is buying backup these days. So I think they should be required, but I come from a backup vendor, so I don't, that might sound a little like I have an agenda, and I do, but the statistics don't show that you should have customers out there without it. Some of the reason that maybe MSPs had a harder time selling backup years ago could be related to cost. It could be that they selected a product that was inherently expensive and maybe met the needs of their customers, but not in a cost-effective way. And then clearly, if it's being offered as an optional service, some customers might say, that's too rich for us. We can't afford that, and we're going to opt out. But for those MSPs really that had competitively priced solutions and knew how to sell them, and selling is another art in of itself. We used to see only an 80% close, but that's changed now. So it's now 96%. So when an MSP has backup services and they know how to sell and they can close those deals. And so should it be required? Well, yeah, it should be. Your customers need it. And honestly, you as an MSP need it too. You should only make exceptions when absolutely necessary. And you may be in a position, as many people are, of not turning away business. I mean, you want to generate as much revenue as possible, but if a customer is adamant about not having backup services, well, what are you going to do then? You might have to onboard that customer anyway. But it is insurance for the both of you. It's insurance for that customer against any malicious or accidental data loss, whether that's crash of a server, loss of a hard drive, an accidental deletion of a folder of data, and ransomware, malware attack, things like that. But it's also insurance for you as the MSP. You are risking your customer relationship should they ever run into a situation where they have lost data and you are not in a position to restore it, because you have to remember, you are the professional, right? They hired you to manage their IT and they're looking to you for guidance. And if they don't have the service that's needed to protect them, then your relationship may be at risk as well.
And
That's just,
you mentioned it should be a requirement. I can say that in our MSP, it's part of the package. Same thing like the managed firewall. We provide the firewall; it's included. Those are the type of things that if you're providing a full-fledged managed services program, it needs to be part of your stack. And if a client were to say, "Well, I don't need that," I guess you need to find out why, because that's a big red flag. When it comes to risk management of accounts, that's a red flag that you have to determine. And is this an account for me or not? Should we keep this account, or should we, pursue this account? So just some things that you got to just take into account.
yeah, absolutely. That's right. And I'll cover that again. So thank you for bringing it up now, because we'll deal with sales objections later on.
Okay.
And yes, as the professional, as the expert in managed IT services, and I'll mention this later on, as you start a la carting everything and giving customers the opportunity to accept or decline a particular service, you may not be telling them the story that they really need to hear, and really that you should be telling them to make your business successful, which is, these are the services that are needed for me to protect you, and that's it. You need to have them, and this is why, and we'll talk about that later on. So next stage is, you determine they're important, you need them, you want to sell them. How do you find the right products? Well, there are a lot of great products out there. If you talk about cars, right? A lot of people might say, well, you know what? I want a Porsche 911 because it's the greatest sports car ever, and that's what I need. And you may have opinions about certain software out there. I hear that this software is the best, or I hear that this will provide the features, or I hear that this one is the right price point. But the important thing to remember is, you are designing services for your set of customers, and you may have a varied set of customers, but they're for your customers and for your business too. So you need to identify the needs of your customers and the needs of your business, and then evaluate the software. And this is something that you do all the time. You do it for security, you do it for firewall, you do it for remote access, you do it for RMM. These are the kind of things that MSPs love to do. We work with a lot of small and medium-sized MSPs, but there's a lot of owner operators out there. You're running a business, but you're also, technically proficient and also doing a lot of the work. So evaluating takes time, but it's something you all know how to do well. Understanding the types of products that the customers are going to need, so they are properly protected, and then spending the time to evaluate them. Now, it's a question, what product do I buy, that may have more than one answer. And that's fine. We work with a ton of companies at our end that have two, sometimes even three backup solutions. Certain backup solutions may have certain price points, may address certain needs that and not address others. And it's okay to have more than one solution. And we do work with a lot of customers ourselves where two is, more common than one. So the goal, from the MSP side, is to find the right products, and these products should offer the right blend of features and the ease of support, because you don't want to be in the support business for a product that's not easy to support, but also one that can generate the necessary profit margins that you need to pay your employees and pay yourself and retire someday. So some of the questions you may want to ask yourself while you're evaluating and looking for a solution are things like, what type of backups will my customers need? If you're dealing primarily in file folder, that might sway you towards one type of solution. If your customers, on the other hand, need full server image backup, then look for products that have that feature. If you need business continuity and the ability to fire up a server with a single click, then you're going to need to look for products that have that. So look over all of those things when it comes to different backup types, but also think about where you want to put these backups. We know we talk a lot about like the 3-2-1 backup principle, which is, something that's been around forever, right? Probably 50 years. And a lot of big businesses that still back up to tape, you still use tape to satisfy, but it really means 3 copies of your customer data, 2 of those copies, the live data plus 2 backups, and one of those backups is stored offsite. More often than not, that offsite backup is the cloud, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. It could still be tape. It could be a data center that you run that you give your customers access to. So think about in advance where you want to put those backups. You want them locally? Do you want them in a cloud? Do you want them in the public cloud somewhere? Do you want them in a private cloud? Are you okay with that? Or is that a problem for you? Decide what's best for you up front, if you can, as that may reduce the set of software that you have to evaluate. But also think about things like, what platforms do you need to protect? Is it Windows only, or you're going to need Mac and Linux support as well, based on what your customers need? Can you have a solution that doesn't provide support for all of the platforms and still take care of them properly? You can ask yourself those questions and also answer them. Do you need mobile support? The ability to back up mobile devices. Are your customers using hosted services like Microsoft 365, which I think is now the new name from Office 365, or something like Google G Suite? Those hosted services, may require a different or a complementary or support within any backup solution you look for. What about things like on-prem applications, things like Microsoft Exchange, Microsoft SQL Server, which is a ton out there and will continue to be for a long time. Virtual platforms, VMware, Hyper-V. Do you need to be doing virtual backups with the software you pick? And lastly, really, what kind of customers are you managing, right? You know your customers best. Are you working with small mom and pop businesses or residential where price may be a serious concern? You may have to look at solutions that offer the right price point for you so you can mark them up sufficiently without overcharging your customers or pricing yourself out where they're just going to refuse the service because it's too much money for them. But really the same with education, government, or commercial businesses. And don't expect to get the same pricing that you're going to end up charging your customers for, say, I don't know, law firms or accounting companies that are based in New York City as ones that are based in, elsewhere in the country, say, Kansas City, Kansas, or Kansas City, Missouri, depending on which side of Kansas you're on, which side of Kansas City you're on. So understand your customers and what's going to be expected by them in terms of pricing. The goal is to select the right products that complement your customers. You don't go out and buy another stupid car analogy company. You don't go out and buy, a $120,000 Mercedes S-Class to deliver drywall to customers when you can buy a, something like a $40,000 Ford Transit van that'll do it much better. So just because a product offers some cool features, they're only going to be useful to you if your customers need them and you can charge the appropriate amount for them. So do that and then plan to reevaluate as your customers change annually, as the market changes, to make sure you're always using the right products. And I know this is something that MSPs tend to do anyway. There's always a continual evaluation of products. All right, so when it comes to selling backup services, and this is purposefully a brief slide because this is not supposed to be super detailed on how to sell backup services, but the first thing I'll mention, because I hear it go the wrong way, even within our company, is you sell value, right? You are doing pain selling. You're solving a problem that the customer has. So sell value, don't talk technical jargon. I mean, unless you know who you're talking to at a particular company, has the technical expertise and is really looking for that, try to avoid doing that. You may be very excited about all of the capabilities of the software you're going to be using, and you may love to talk to your colleagues and friends who are in the field. But I think all of us can think back to many occasions, at least I can, where friends of mine will ask me a technical question at like a party or something like that, and I will go into so much detail they just start making fun of me. Their eyes glaze over and they just laugh because of the amount of detail I'm giving them, which is not what they wanted. So the customer is retaining your services because they do not have the expertise and staff to do the job correctly. They're looking to you. You're the experts. You are protecting their company data against things like accidental and malicious data loss, and you're minimizing their financial loss due to things like downtime or extended downtime, and you're helping protect their business. Also sell your expertise. You've been doing this a while, right? You know what you're doing. You're not only going to protect, the customer, but you're going to protect, the actual assets, things like new desktops and servers as they come in. You're going to make sure that the data is protected for as long as the customer needs it protected. That's the retention side, not a word you want to use with customers. We'll keep the data as long as is needed, or you'll provide some guides to them if they're not sure. You'll ensure that the customer can get data back, the restore process, the recovery process, and you'll make sure data is encrypted for HIPAA compliance or whatever other compliance needs they have. And you'll make sure the data is stored off-site to protect them against disaster or things like malware that have a very easy time getting at data that's stored locally on the network.
I just wanted to throw out a couple of things here. And, we host our calls every Wednesday and Friday for MSPs. And one of the biggest things that we've been talking about is exactly this, is staying away from that technical jargon. The critical thing here is that the quickest way to get a potential client disengaged with you is to overwhelm them with technical topics. And it should be all about the business. We as IT professionals need to put our technology hat aside and focus on the business discussions. The value proposition isn't around, you can do this, you can do that, it's got this feature and that feature. It's all about the protection of their data and the safeguard of their organization. And, those are just key things that I think we're uncomfortable talking about, because again, we're so used to talking about the really cool things that are part of it. And we just have to really focus on that right conversation. Otherwise, it's over their head, they're disinterested, and the next MSP that comes their way to do a presentation might only talk about business and get the deal.
And it's I didn't mention it here, but it is very, very difficult to turn around a conversation. If you're in sales, you've ever been in sales, you know that when you're speaking to a customer, you have that one opportunity to get them interested enough that you can have a second conversation. And if they don't want to have that second conversation, it is hugely difficult to get them to kind of come around. So it's better to do it right the first time if you can. Much more difficult to come back to it and try to turn it around once they've decided that they're not interested. And as Dan said earlier, some MSPs make backup services a requirement. And that's great if you can do that. Now, if you can't do that because you're not in a position of turning away business, and that's just the reality of the world, right? You may not be in a position to tell, a percentage of your customers that you're not going to do business with them. Maybe you can't pay your bills. There are, you have, needs too from a financial perspective. So I have spoken to MSPs that will make certain customers sign a waiver saying that they're refusing the service. That can serve two kind of things. One, it's a reminder that you're doing something stupid that we do not recommend, and we're making you put your John Hancock on it to just really immortalize the fact that you're doing something bad. That could go a long way to actually turning it around to have them rethink it. You don't want to be waiving those kinds of services with your eyes wide open. But honestly, it's up to you. If you don't want to do that and you just need to close the deal, then close it. It is a risk, but it's the risk you and your customer are both willing to take. The other thing you can do, like Dan said earlier, sometimes backup services are bundled with other services. So you may find that, the firewall, the security, the RMM is all a part of the base package in some fashion. There may be extra charges based on how much you're storing for your backups. But if it's all packaged up together at a price that's right for your customers, that can go a long way to making sure that you're able to sell it and close it. All right, moving on. Okay, pricing. So you've selected your service, you're trying to sell it. How are you going to price this stuff? Well, I think unfortunately, there are a lot of ways to price your backup services. If we have time, I'll show an example later on of sort of a semi-fictional customer of ours and how they've chosen to bundle things up. But the ways we mostly see with our service, and there are going to be more out there, and feel free to hop on chat and let everybody else know about is how you sell it. We see some customers, doing a la carte pricing. A la carte pricing is where they're just charging their customers based on how much cloud storage they're using. They're not even charging for the backup service. Now, that's because our backup service and the way it's priced, they can compensate for that by just charging for the storage. Probably more of our customers use a hybrid type model where they're charging for the backup service if it's not included as a part of a larger set of services. They might charge, whatever, say, $10, $15 a month for endpoints and include, say something like 100 gigs of storage, and charge more, $25, $30 or something for servers, and include maybe 250 gigs and charge the customer on top of that. And I'll have an example of that later on if we have time. So we talked about the bundling. That's also another way to price it. But you need to understand your profit margins. And this is not a webinar where we'll talk about what margins you need to make on your services. I hear numbers thrown around from people that we've worked with who are in the business of helping MSPs figure out how much money they need to make on services, of making on average in the 60 to 70% across all services. But just remember that if you're making more than that with other services, you may have an opportunity to make less with others. So, there's no reason to make, 70% markup on a product when you're reselling it if you're making way more than that on others and you feel like the 70% markup is going to price you out. So you have to understand your financials, obviously, how much money you're making based on how much you're spending to pay your bills and, to make a profit. But I'll try to get to an example later on. So I think there's something in Q&A. Let me see if I can get
we have a question here from Norm, and Norm is asking about, you're talking a lot about full service backup features. So, more of the image based, and he said, I remember MSP360 Cloudberry as a file and folder backup. So great question. Give some clarification on that.
Yes, so I'm not making this. I have one slide at the end that has just some bullets about the company. So we do, we've done image-based backup for quite some time. So I don't know how long ago you evaluated. So we do file folder, we do image, we do SQL Server and Exchange, and VMware and Hyper-V, and Office 365 and G Suite, and we have a whole range of options out there. So yes, when I talk about full service, I don't mean to imply that we're going to do everything you need. This is not a product-focused webinar. We are probably not going to do everything, and that's fine. If we're not, look for a complementary solution is what we would say in our case if we're not doing one thing that you need. But find the right products for you, whatever they are, even if they're not us, right? I'm not trying to force anybody into MSP360. I just want to have a conversation about, just about, selling backup services and designing your backup services. Okay, moving on. Oops, sorry. There we go. Overcoming sales objections. So we talk a lot about selling. Dan kind of mentioned some things earlier, what you can do to avoid any objections your customers have when you're trying to sell them on backup services. Some of the ones you might hear are the customer saying that, oh, we can do backup ourselves. We don't need you. Well, I think one of the answers to that is, being in IT is time consuming. And that really is the one reason that companies look for managed IT services, is they don't have the time and probably the expertise to do everything. So you're going to have to decide, if you have a customer out there that's using a backup solution themselves and they want to continue using it, if you want to support it, or if you're going to tell them absolutely not. We can manage that solution for you, but you cannot do it yourself. We can't provide you the protection you need, the management you need, if you're in charge of one of the most critical pieces of it. Because if something goes wrong, we'd be powerless to actually stop it or prevent it or do something about it. And really, so managed IT services is why they come to you in the first place. Why would they want to take on the role of IT management when they're willing to spend money on IT management? It doesn't make a lot of sense. When the cost of having you do it may not be any more than what they're paying. You may be getting pricing that's designed for MSPs from the companies you're buying services from and reselling services. And because of that, you're buying things at a probably a lower price than, most enterprises or businesses can buy them at, because they know you're going to need to mark it up. And it's the same with us at MSP360. Our prices are low, so you can mark them up and then still sell them to customers at a reasonable price. So it's also a risk. We talked about the risk earlier. What happens if the customers loses data and can't restore, and they're in charge of managing that? How will that reflect on your relationship with, the customer's relationship with the MSP and your relationship with the customer? Will they look at you sideways like this is somehow your fault? Probably. It's a risk not being in charge. Next thing is it's too expensive. Well, part of that is, what is the cost to your business, the customer's business, for data loss? There may be lawsuits. The business may be down and unable to run. And how much business are you going to lose daily if you're a mom and pop shop and your point of sale system goes down, or your critical, server goes down and you can't process transactions? How much downtime can you withstand without hurting your business? But also ask yourself, those are on the customer side, but also ask yourself as the MSP, if you've already selected solutions, are you positioning the best solution for this customer? Are you selecting a sophisticated, expensive business continuity solution for a mom and pop shop that doesn't need it? They just need their, important files backed up. If that's the case, you may have to reevaluate either which solutions are in your portfolio, or just switch to offering them a different solution if maybe you overestimated what their needs. This question sort of came earlier about Dropbox. Customer may say, well, the data is already in the cloud, so backup's not needed. Well, cloud data is at just as much risk of loss, within the confines of where it lives, than any data. Even cloud VMs are not completely avoidable from being at risk. Snapshots of VMs are not the best backup, and certainly just mirroring files locally and in the cloud, think of OneDrive with something like Microsoft 365 is not really backup. Things that mirror can get out of sync. Data loss on one side can be translated to files being removed on the other end. There's no versioning there for files. If you need to get back yesterday's version because you made some bad edits to it, saved it out, and now it replicated up in your OneDrive or in your Dropbox, there may be no way to go back. So, evaluate those needs. The cloud doesn't necessarily mean that it's immune from the need for backup, and it probably means it probably still needs to be backed up. Also, last thing is really compliance. Does the customer have any compliance needs? Things like retention. Do I need to keep backups for a certain number of years? Are you working with CPAs, so maybe you're required by law to keep their customers' tax filings for 7 years because they may be on the hook for an audit at any point? Does the customer have HIPAA compliance needs and the encryption needs that go with it? And is the customer willing to maybe deal with that themselves or avoid complying to certain needs should they want to encrypt things? Using something like Dropbox as an example may not apply the appropriate encryption. It may, but it may not, right? And I'm not trying to call Dropbox out. I'm just saying that replicating local files to the cloud may actually store those files in the cloud in the same format that they exist locally. That potentially is unencrypted, right? And you want to make sure any data that you're storing is fully encrypted.
Hey, David, a couple of quick things. One thing in regards to insurance, I want to throw out as a comment from Shane mentioning that some insurance companies will not insure you without a backup strategy for your business. So, that's something that you can certainly, mention to your clients, prospects. Another thing that came up here was a question from Patricio, and the question here was, how about selling backup as a subscription and then restore a la carte? Do or don't?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a good question. And I probably should have mentioned that you have hourly rates probably at your MSP for doing project-based work. And I think contractually you would probably have something in there that if somebody needs for example, a server rebuilt, you know, you're not going to spend, 4 hours doing that, probably without some compensation. Or maybe you're giving your customers a certain number of hours of free work or free restore work, per month as needed, or a number of requests. That's entirely up to you, but I think it's totally appropriate to bill your customers for a certain type of work. Now, if you get a help desk ticket from a customer that says, hey, you know what, I accidentally deleted my Excel file, can you restore yesterday's version? That would really help. Is that something you're going to want to charge them, something for? Maybe not, but if they call you up, 100 times in a month and say, I need these a la carte restores, that may be too much. At that point, you may be losing a lot of profit in time being spent by your techs doing all this work. So you may want to build in limits on, how many, restore tickets can be opened per month. You may want to provide limits on what types of restores will be covered within those limits. That's a good question. You're going to have to decide what's best for you based on how you're billing your customers, what you're charging them for the service. And unfortunately, it's not something I can answer definitively one way or the other. You're just going to have to think about it from a business perspective. Do what works for you. I know MSPs love to share information with each other, and that's great. But like I mentioned earlier, don't assume that the rates being charged by one MSP for commercial businesses in New York City is going to apply to not-for-profits elsewhere in the country, or somebody out of the country, or government
Right.
versus education versus, commercial business versus not-for-profit. They're all going to have different price points and expectations. You're going to have different competition out there. You may need different software to support them. So do what's best for you and your customers.
I'll just throw out one thing for our MSP. So, we have two packages. We have one that's the typical all-inclusive, where everything is included. And we will, unless it falls into something that would be considered an excluded as far as coverage, which we have a number of things, acts of God, fire, those type of things. So those would be billable. Now, the other thing to keep in mind too is our second package is all on-site is billable, remote's included. So if we can do something remotely, like you said, if you're going to do a restore of a few files here or there, it's all included. But then if we do need to go out on-site, then we bill for that. So I guess I look at it from a perspective, if it's a major disaster and you haven't built in cost for the potential for that down the road, then you're going to want to charge for it.
Exactly. All right. So you've decided on your products now. You're selling them. What do you need to do, generally speaking, to get prepared? This is not for customer onboarding. This is just you have new products in the portfolio. So a couple of just guidelines. Your mileage may vary, as always. So I think where possible, design a set of backup plans that you can easily share across as many customers as possible. So try not to do, specific backup plans for each. Oh, we lost Dan. For each endpoint. And everybody, let me know if you can still hear me. Okay. When Dan disappears, I get a little worried. So just let me know if the audio is okay. Here he comes again. So if you're backing up endpoints and you want to just back up the users folder on all your endpoints, use that as the default template. Image plans, maybe you're just going to back up the boot drive, the C drive, and you're going to use file folder plans for the additional drives, or maybe you want to use image-based backup for every volume that's available on the server. By avoiding any specialized client backup strategies, you will help avoid additional manual management needed for those endpoints and servers later on. Now, that's not to say you're not going to have to do that. You may have a server out there with specific needs. You may have a client out there where very specifically you only need to back up one user folder or a folder off the root, if that's what really they're doing. You can account for that possibility, but try to design your plans to accommodate as many customers and endpoints and servers as possible. Next thing, document and test your installation and configure. When you onboard your customer, you're going to have to get agents installed and get them configured within the software. You may know how to do it, but it's always best to document everything in a form that's understandable to you. Everybody has different styles for documentation. We know documentation is really important in the MSP community, which is why there's a lot of products out there that deal with documentation and that kind of information. But document how to get the agents out there, how to get them onboarded within the software, any initial configuration that needs to happen. That way you can manage that in one place and apply that across all your customers as you onboard them. But also document and test your backup and restore procedures. And that means, backup and restore from file folder, backup and restore for image, how you're doing your virtual machine backup, if that's what you want to do, how you're going to do your SQL Server backups with your full differential and transaction logs. You may have an inherent understanding of those things, but it's also important, separate from any vendor documentation, to write that stuff down. And that way you can reference it whenever needed. All right. But also document the management side, right? You are going to install this stuff, I'll install these agents, get these backups running, and they are going to work. I think of it as a set it and forget it type thing, but occasionally an error may be reported. Something can't be backed up. The backup failed for some reason. How are you going to deal with that? How do you manage that? Where are you going to look? Where are the notifications going to go? How are they going to be processed internally? How do you log into the management console of whatever software you're using, or use the local agent to address a particular issue? So document as much of that stuff as you can upfront. That way you have it available. And then again, like everything, revisit the shared information, I would say at a minimum annually. Vendor software changes. You may not be in a position to update it as the vendor software changes and gets updated. So at a minimum annually, but also if you can, when there's changes to the software itself, or when you introduce a new backup type, or you're now, obviously if you have new software in there. So get that stuff documented upfront. And now you're going to onboard your customer. So we've talked about this before in other webinars. Very important to do this customer specific business impact analysis and risk assessment upfront, right? You are not going to be able to design the right backup plans for your customers. You're not going to be able to set expectations with them properly unless you know the basics of what they expect. So first thing, what are their restore time objectives? That's really going to dictate how much downtime they can have. If they tell you, I need to be up and running in an hour, that might push you towards some type of software that can do that. If they say, I can't be down for more than a day, then you just have to make sure that your software can address a 1 day of downtime. Restore point objectives. And these are not terms you'll use with your customers. You're going to ask them the basic questions. How long can you afford to be down, right? And you'll make it a point of telling them, the software we use that's going to reduce your downtime may cost more. So let us know honestly. The restore point objectives is you're not going to convey to them as that. You're going to say, how much data are you willing to lose? If they're in a highly transactional business, maybe they're going to say every 15 minutes. And if this data is going into SQL Server, that will tell you immediately, you better be running transaction log backups every 15 minutes. If they tell you, we can redo, a half a day's worth of work, then that might reduce whatever frequency of backups you've designed into the scheduling.
You
also identify.
go
ahead, Dan. Sorry.
You mentioned the setting customer expectations in the documentation. One of the things that we do is we put together a critical data backup worksheet. And what we'll do is we will, obviously a server, we're going to do a full image, but you just never know where there might be other, loose data out there. There might be a certain application that somebody has, and there's a small database that resides on a local workstation. So the reason for documenting this is that you then can go over with the client, especially when it's a new client, go over, okay, these are all the locations in which we're going to secure data, cover other expectations in there, your recovery time objective and, your RTO and, throw all that in there, and then have them sign off on it, because then they have some skin in the game. They have some ownership versus it being 100% on us that we, to the best of our knowledge, have, found where all your critical data is and we're backing it up. Put that on them just so that it's a together decision and they've signed off on it.
Exactly. That's a great point. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, getting customers to acknowledge everything is hugely important. I think most small claim court cases in this country stem from a misunderstanding through verbal communication of expectations in any contract.
Right.
And the last thing I'll say is decide whether or not you're going to need local backups. If you are, then you're probably going to have to put a NAS on site or leverage some file server if they have that. Know that up front and set your customer expectations. That goes a long way to what Dan just said. You can use things like your RMM tool to inventory software to make sure that you have a better idea about what's out there. They might have software running that they don't need. They might have software out there that they weren't able to explicitly tell you is there because maybe they don't have the technical expertise. But set expectations with your customers and do it in writing. Like Dan said, don't tell customers your servers will be up and running in 2 hours, or don't agree to a 2-hour restore time objective if you know it's going to take longer, right? If you agree to a 4-hour restore time or a 2-hour response time to restore a file, or an hour, whatever it is, and you do it and you deliver on that more quickly, you will look good. If you agree to an hour and it takes 2 hours, you will look bad, right? So set expectations up front. Don't tell customers there won't be any data loss. If you know there can be some, explain to them how much data might be lost based on how the backups are run, based on how frequently you're backing up databases or files. And then document everything, including the restore process. This is hugely important, especially with bigger customers out there. How are you going to restore their environment? And think worst case scenario. Somebody downloads some malware, something like ransomware. It spreads throughout the entire network. Endpoints are offline, servers are offline. You need to completely rebuild that environment. How are you going to do that? You can't have that conversation then and there when that happens. The client is going to be looking to you to rebuild their business in the most efficient way possible. So which endpoints and servers need to be restored first and in what order? How are you going to need to do it? Document everything, right? And revisit this again annually, or as new servers and endpoints are added by the customer, ask the question, is this a critical endpoint? Is this a critical server? What's running on it? Where does it fit within the scheme of the, set of servers that exist at this customer in terms of when it needs to be restored? There may be a critical set of, endpoints and servers that need to be there to get the business up and running. Maybe it's a dental office. They need the server running and they need one endpoint where they can do all of their scheduling and billing until the next endpoint is up and running so they can separate schedule and billing as needed. You need to understand that in order to get them restored in the most efficient way. All right. Oh, well, that's mostly it. So I can't believe we have 8 minutes left and now I'm on the MSP360 slide. So if anybody has any questions, throw them in the chat, or I haven't been looking at Q&A.
Nothing new at this point.
Yeah, so I think everybody's been using the chat. So if you have anything you want to ask, please do. If not, I'll tell you a little bit about MSP360. I'll give you some places to go next if you're interested in more information. And then I'll show you that pricing example because I think we'll have time for it. So what we do at MSP360, and one of our main products is our managed backup product. And that's a product that we designed about a decade ago. That we designed to really be 3 things: affordable, powerful, and easy to manage. We wanted it to be affordable because we were selling to managed service providers who are in the business of reselling services. And when you're in the business of reselling things, you expect to be buying things at a lower cost. So we offer our licenses at very competitive prices so you can mark them up sufficiently and still generate profit for yourself. We back up, just about everything. We can back up Windows endpoints and servers. We have file, folder, as well as image-based backup. We back up Linux, a whole variety of distributions. We can back up Macs. We can back up VMware and Hyper-V, as well as Microsoft SQL Server and Exchange if you have those on-prem applications. We don't see too much Exchange anymore on-prem. Most folks are using hosted Exchange or hosted email like Google G Suite. But there's a ton of SQL Server out there. I spent a good part of my career in the SQL Server market. And that's obviously still continues to be a hugely popular relational database. We also support Office 365 and Google G Suite, or I should say Microsoft 365 now. So if you have customers using those hosted applications, you want to back up email, contacts, calendar, OneDrive, that type of stuff, we support that as well. But we don't back up for backup's sake. We back up so you can restore. We try to provide as flexible a recovery as possible. So it doesn't matter what kind of backup you're doing. Even if it's image or virtual machine, you can always restore individual files or folders out of those backups. We have bare metal restore and the ability to restore to virtual machines if needed, entire images, or to the cloud if needed. Everything's centrally administered through a thin client management console. We host the service in AWS. There's no server components for you to install either at the MSP or at the customer. All communication happens directly between the agents you install on the servers and endpoints you're managing, and the cloud storage you're managing. So everything's fully encrypted at the source, encrypted over the wire and stored in cloud storage that never travels through an MSP360 server or doesn't have to travel back to the MSP in any way. And one of the things that we do to keep the costs down and make it flexible for you, the MSP, is we support all the public cloud storage vendors out there. So you can see the list on the right, AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, Wasabi, and Backblaze B2. You may have noticed the Wasabi icon wobbling earlier. That was more of a reminder of me to tell you that we are now offering a unified billing option with Wasabi storage. So if you don't want to have to decide on which cloud storage vendor to use, we will sell you Wasabi storage at the same exact price you can buy it from Wasabi directly through a partnership deal we have with Wasabi, and you'll get a single bill from us. So that's an option for you as well.
That's great. Yeah.
All right, where to go next? You're an Everything MSP member. You can hit that link and we'll give you $100 in free credit for new customers. If you want a demo or you want to sign up for a trial, you can just head over to MSP360.com. There's a link there to sign up. Don't need a credit card. We'll give you 14 days initially, plus 2 terabytes of sandbox space to play with in Wasabi. If you have your own cloud you want to use with the trial, you can do that. If you need an extended trial, the account manager will be happy to do that. If you need a specific demo, you can sign up for a trial or request a demo from one of our solution architects. Who'd be happy to demo anything you need about the product, including on any cloud that you need it demoed. We have a remote desktop product now. It's called Managed Remote Desktop. It's fully encrypted, remote desktop sharing with voice chat and typing chat and file transfer and all that stuff. And it's completely managed through the same interface you can use for backup if you decide to use our managed backup, although you can use them separately. So you can use managed remote desktop without our backup product if you need. I believe we're licensing it by technician, I think, with unlimited connections per month. If you want, hit up our MSP University or previous webinars. We have them posted. We have a lot of MSP focused information on there. That's just our way of giving back to the MSP community. Most of it's not product focused. It's just about, running an MSP business and things we've picked up along the way with working with customers and information we want to convey. It's available free to anybody that wants to read it. Previous webinars are posted. I'll talk about this and then I'll let Dan wrap up so we actually finish on time. Oh, so there's a question there. Can I have my own data center as a backup destination? The answer to that is actually yes, you can. So we do support through a specialized connector something called Minio. Minio is open source software for Windows and for Linux. You can search for MINIO. Just search Google Minio, MINIO. You'll get right to the website. Minio allows you to expose your own data center as S3 compatible storage. And that way your customers could back up to the Minio data connector and everything will be encrypted and sent over the wire, fully encrypted, but will end up in your data center. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it, if you want, is if you have VPN set up that will allow whatever endpoints and servers that you're backing up to hit your data storage, your data center directly. You can do it that way. I like the Minio option mostly because I like locking down our agents. That way a ransomware can't do anything with them. I like the fact that the S3 API is not, NFS or CIFS. It's not a network share that's easily accessible or accessible really with, your basic type of malware that's out there. And it's just a way to, not fully air gap because there's a connection there, obviously, but called semi air gap or air gap with air quotes, your data. So you can do that as well. There's a few options out there. So very quickly, let me just say what's going on in this slide. This is sort of like a sort of an example of a real customer of ours. I just changed where they're backing up and how much they're charging. So this is a hybrid example I talked about earlier, where this particular MSP is charging their customers for backup services, different price for endpoints and servers, $10 for an endpoint with some free storage, $25 for servers with a little more free storage. They are managing 500 endpoints and 250 servers, and they pay us after discounting. The more you spend with us, I don't mean quantities, I mean the more dollars you spend, the higher your discount goes. So they're spending about $3.20 per month per license from us for those 750 endpoints and servers. And they're backing up over 200 terabytes worth of data, backup data in Wasabi. Wasabi charges $5.99. That's US for those of you not in the United States on this call, per month per terabyte. And they're charging their customers, in addition to that base charge, and all of that free storage is pooled together, anything over that is billed out at 6 cents per gigabyte. So there's a big markup between 59/100ths of 1 cent per gigabyte, which is the Wasabi charge. It's very inexpensive. And the 6 cents that they're charging, but it's still very inexpensive, right? All things considered. So the blue line is what they pay per month, the MSP, for backup services with us, as well as the storage in Wasabi, and they pay about $3,600. But their monthly recurring revenue is over 17,000. So their margin is about 13,500. That's roughly 5 times what they're spending, they're making back. And the point of me showing this is not only to show you that you can have great margins with our software, but that there's a lot of wiggle room. 6 cents per gigabyte is pretty inexpensive. I've seen other services out there charge MSPs 10 to 12 cents a gigabyte for the privilege of using private cloud storage with them. So there you may have a lot of wiggle room in there to charge more if you need, or to even charge less if you don't need to make that kind of margin. So that's what I have. We're a minute over.
There's a question. Yeah, we got a question out there. So Norm wants to know, if he chooses file and folder backup, is it possible through MSP360 to find out when a user creates a root folder?
So that might be something your RMM software can monitor when new folders show up off the root. But I will say this, and I know it's not possible. If you have end users out there at your customers running in anything but, and I'm just speaking Windows here because, I've only worked on Macs and I have very little Linux experience, but running with anything other than basic user privileges, right? If they're running as power users in Windows, if they're running as administrator and users, then you are exposing them to major issues with malware, and not to mention installing things that they shouldn't be. End users should not be allowed to install software. If they're running with user privileges, they will not have rights to put things off the root, generally speaking. Usually they would need to be a power user or administrator. And we know how a lot of us, power users, run our systems. We may be running under a user account, and UAC kicks in and we just click yes for approval. That's because we're not prompting for passwords. But you want to make sure your end users cannot do things like create a new root folder. Everything that users do should be in the users folder. That's where everything should live. But if you were backing up the root with our software, we would pick up as automatically as new folders were created. So you could, as an example, back up the root folder, say C:\\, but explicitly exclude the Windows folder. That way everything's sort of covered. You still may back up more files than you need. That's why I say it's better just to back up the users folder when we're talking about, not servers. That way everything is sort of covered. But also make sure your users are not running with any kind of privileged accesses that could expose them to malware and could also get them in trouble if they start doing things like creating folders off the root.
Excellent. Any other questions out there? Actually, you know what? There
Oh
are
yeah, I see three
the
Q&A.
Q&A.
Now that I
Yeah,
look.
Q&A. So what kind of technology is used for Office 365 backup? And does it back up email, chat, Teams, OneDrive, and SharePoint?
We back up email, contacts, calendar, OneDrive, SharePoint, and we are working on some Teams support right now. And I assume chat is Teams, the same thing. If not, I apologize. I'm not a Microsoft 365 expert. And certainly we can demo that for you. If you request a specific demo. I did do a Office 365, Microsoft 365 webinar recently. I'm not sure it's posted, but I can check as well. Next question, is it out of band backup, meaning if the user deletes something intraday before nightly backup kicks in? Well, I mean, yes, because you are going to be retaining multiple versions of files, and you should be retaining any files that are, say, deleted locally. So while we have the ability to remove files from backup storage that are deleted locally, and we could think of, the pretty, innocuous example where somebody's like, hey, I don't need that file anymore. Let me just delete it. And they're really not going to need a backup for it. And then you might delete that file from backup storage. That's pretty dangerous, right? So while we do have the ability to remove things from backup storage, I would say if you are going to do that, put a delay in. We have the ability to put a delay in, put a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day delay in. That way, if they get hit by ransomware, which generally speaking renames files into the operating system that will look like a file delete and a file create, you don't end up removing your backup files. That's the last thing you want. So yes, if somebody deletes a backup during the day, even if a backup runs after that, you're going to be keeping multiple versions of these files. Maybe you'll keep 3. You can always restore to a previous backup. And, even if it was changed, think of the example where somebody's been editing a huge Excel spreadsheet, accidentally selects all or deletes one of the sheets in there, saves it out, comes in the next morning and realizes, holy moly, I accidentally deleted the sheet that has, 10 million records on it and huge pivot tables, and I have no idea how I'm going to recreate that. Even though the one without that pivot table and that big sheet has been saved, you'll be able to restore from a previous version very easily. Is there a guide for creating a backup appliance for a hybrid backup? Well, you don't really need an appliance. With our hybrid backup, we would target any local storage. That could be local disk, but more likely than not, it's a NAS on the network. So you would define that NAS. You would use the NAS software more likely than not to create a network share. And so it would be available as whatever / NAS name / target folder name. And you would use that hybrid folder name within your hybrid backups within our product. And then we would do single pass backups to that NAS and then move that data from the NAS out to the cloud in a single pass. So that's how it would work. If that's not clear, obviously we could demo it. And one more question. Office 365, we do keep multiple versions in Microsoft 365. I believe we're fixed right now at 4 backups a day, but we do keep multiple versions. So you would still be able to restore an old version of a Microsoft 365 doc, even if it weren't stored locally. Now, a lot of times those files are replicated locally. And if you are backing up the local folder as well, you'll have separate backups from whatever exists on Microsoft 365. But even if it's Microsoft 365 only, because they're living in the cloud, we can version those as well.
And that's a critical area that I think is often overlooked, is the backup of the G Suite in Office 365 or Microsoft 365. And certainly a way to drive some additional revenue, but also just to protect your client, to help them get over the misconception that because it's in the cloud that you don't need backup. And it is our job as IT professionals to help educate our clients and prospects about that. There is one other question in the chat. It says, so MSP360 encryption is at the source. Would the client have to share the key when restoring?
So you as the MSP are going to be setting up these backup plans. You are going to, if you can use the same encryption key across all your customers if you want. You don't have to rotate keys unless specifically there's a compliance need for it. You don't have to use different keys for different customers. The important thing usually for things like HIPAA compliance is that the data is encrypted, we will encrypt it with AES 256. You can use your passphrase. You can store that password anywhere you feel is safe, in a password safe. If you're using a password service, you can write it on a piece of paper and put it in a safe. Your customers probably shouldn't know that, what that password is. You can manage everything from the console, so you don't actually have to, manage it at the agent itself. In fact, we usually recommend the agents are disabled through the management software. That way, nobody can access it locally. Last thing you want is end users getting on, or ransomware having access to the agent and doing something specific to, hurt your MSP360 backup. So when you ask, would the client have to share the key? If you mean client, your customer, then no, they shouldn't even know what it is. Now, the client may say, you know what, we want to know what the encryption key is, because last thing we want you as an MSP to do is hold us hostage. If you have a customer out there who's very concerned that you might do something illegal, like hold back an encryption key if they canceled service, you could certainly share it with them. That way, the data in the cloud, which presumably you probably still own anyway. As mentioned earlier, you could use their specific cloud. If they said, we have a relationship with Wasabi and we want you to put all of our backup data in our own Wasabi storage, you could certainly do that with our software. It's fully supported. You can have as many cloud accounts as you need, whether they're your customers or your own. But you could share it with the customer, or you could just hold on to it privately since you're in charge of managing it.
Awesome.
Oh, no, you don't have to share it with us. Everything's fully encrypted in the service. Our people can't see it, if that's what you're asking. So yes, we have to store the encryption keys in the software in order to run the backups, right? But we can't see them. They don't get redisplayed when you edit plans. They are encrypted with your keys internally with our service, and they sit there fully encrypted. If you want to change your passphrase, you can change it at any point, but we won't show you the old one. And when it comes time to restore, you could theoretically store restore plans in there in perpetuity with the encryption key fully in there. More likely than not, you would just type it in when needed at restore time, in which case it's not stored at all except on the backup side. But it would have to be it's stored. It's not stored plain text. It's encrypted itself, if that's what you're asking. So I hope that answers. If not, feel free to clarify.
All right, looks like we've answered all of our questions. So, we use MSP360 in our business. We use it alongside with Wasabi, and it's been a very good product for us. But don't take my word for it. Take your own. Take advantage of the opportunity. Go to MSP360.com/everything MSP, and you will be able to take advantage of the special offer that we have available. You're going to get $100 credit towards MSP360 backup services, and that's a awesome opportunity for you to try it out and see how well it works for you and for your business. And actually, one other question: do VM backups get spun up to test?
So on we do not have. So I think the easiest way to answer it is we are not business continuity software. So you're not going to click play and fire it up in place. You could schedule restore operations if you need. So you have VMs waiting for you should you need them. We do have some capabilities now on the image side. I don't know if they've been rolled out yet for the virtual side. Well, we will restore a full image as a Hyper-V VM, just enough so we can start it up and do a screenshot of the Windows boot screen,
Right.
and that it's actually running. I don't think we do that yet for virtual machines. I apologize. I don't know. That'd be a great question to ask your account manager. Or Dan can, if Dan wants to get me a list of the chats and we have access to your emails, I can have somebody reach out to you and get back to you. And if it's not supported, let you know when it might be coming.
Yeah, I'll get you Norm's contact information, his email. All right, everybody, I want to thank you for your time today. A couple of other quick notes before we part ways here. Everything MSP hosts a call every Wednesday and Friday, And we do stream it right on our Facebook group, which is, if you go to facebook.com/groups/everything MSP, we do stream it there. Or you can watch it right within Zoom and participate and be part of the fun. If you go to everythingmsp.com, you can get more information about that. So with that being said, I want to thank everybody for your time today. Thank you for showing up. David, as always, again, thank you for your knowledge. Thank you for everything that you shared with us today. A lot of great information to help us be more successful. And I do want to add that the documents that MSP360 puts together that are free, and they're posted all in our Facebook group, are amazing. And actually, they're all on your website as well. But they are amazing documents that, right here. So, when you look at any vendor, you look at their product, right? But you also want to look at how are they there to assist you to be successful. And they have loaded up a ton of information here that goes well beyond backup. And it's all about managing your business. So take advantage of that. That's all right on their website. So with that being said, everybody have an awesome day. And David, thank you once again.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dan, for having us. We love doing these things. I love doing them. I enjoy writing them, actually, and getting feedback from everyone. So it's always an interactive crowd with your people. And so it's one of our favorite webinars to do. So thanks.
Appreciate it. Everybody have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.